Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our next session in the Symposium, Earth, Climate, Dreams, Depth Psychological Reflections in the Age of the Anthropocene. And I'm here today with Susanna Benson, who is an educator, a counselor, a researcher, and also an academic. Hi, Susanna. Thanks so much for being with me today.
Hi, Bonnie. Lovely to be here and to join the symposium. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to participating.
Me too. I'm really glad to have you here because the topic that you're going to be addressing today is pretty much wholly in the field of dreams. And this is not something that we have emphasized as fully in some of the other conversations that have already taken place. And I'm really excited to be able to dig into the dreams and the dream work and that aspect of things because it's such a critical way that we can get messages from the unconscious, and not just messages for ourselves, but also for the planet and the greater culture at large. So let me, before we jump in, and I'm always anxious to do that, but let me go ahead and read your bio so that everybody knows a little bit more about you, and then we'll go from there. Dr. Susanna Benson has a diverse background as academic, researcher, educator, and counselor, as I mentioned. She has qualifications and experience in education, academic research, publishing, social ecology, and transpersonal counseling. Dr. Benson has studied, worked, and lived in the United States, Europe, and Asia, and holds a doctorate from the University of Western Sydney, College of Arts, Education and Social Sciences, School of Social Ecology, and Lifelong Learning. Dr. Benson is a board member and immediate past president of the International Association for the Study of Dreams, also known as IASD, and is the founding president of Dream Network Australia, Incorporated. So, Susanna, I think that everybody can get a pretty good feel from that, just how involved you are in dreams and dream work. I know that a lot of your research has been focused on that, beginning with, probably not even beginning with the doctorate, but certainly since you've done your work in the doctorate there. I wonder maybe the best place to start then is if you would just start sharing a little bit about how you began to get interested in dreams and what you see as the value of listening to our dreams.
Thanks, Bonnie. Yes, I'd love to share that insight or those reflections too with the audience. My background, as you read from the bio, is diverse, and I'd primarily been working in education. I was working as an academic at a university in Sydney in the field of education and English literature and language. And I reached a point in my own work and experience where dreams came very much to the fore in the way that I was getting insight into myself and relating to others, and I wanted to explore that field more. So I was reading in the field, and I was very impressed with a book that I read, my first sort of real wake-up call to think about dreams in a broader field, particularly in relationship to the social cultural field, which was not something I'd ever taken in from my own education. I think that would be true for most of us in the Western rationalistic thoughts tradition. And that was The Third Reich of Dreams. It was a book that really made a big impact upon me, and it has on many other researchers as well, in terms of expanding my sense of the social cultural impact of dreams and how dreams and culture really interpenetrate, and really set me on a path to look at how I would revalue dreams in my own life and how they would have relevance for a culture, to our own culture, our own way of being, to expand our sense of what was important, what was happening both consciously and in the deeper consciousness, that which is implicit rather than more explicit in relationships. So it was really from that sense of the significance and the importance. Just a little bit about that book was that it's a collection of 300 dreams collected during the period of 1933 through 1939 in Nazi Germany, and it really reflects the culture that was in turmoil. And the dreams that reflect not only personal issues, obviously, of trauma and stress, but are very present-centered. They're literal. There's a sense of what's happening on the surface is also happening beneath. It's not something that is so much in terms of dream symbolism. They're very explicit. And I wondered, what would have been the impact at the time when I read it, to think about if people had shared their dreams more openly, if there was broader forums for sharing dreams. So it really brought me into the field of dreams, and through that 20 or more years ago into working with the International Association for the Study of Dreams, in which I've, as you just mentioned, served as recent past president. And through that organisation, really, I began to see a breadth to the field. It really introduced me to the broader field of dream studies, which is a extraordinary field. The International Association for the Study of Dreams, I think, is entering into its 34th year. But it's an association that brings together researchers, medical, sleep researchers, psychiatrists, counsellors, artists, all interested individuals in dreams. And through that, we have a much greater and expanded field of what dreams are, dream symbolism. And really, it's an expansive field of consciousness that I think we're talking about when we talk about dreams.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And I think that most people who are used to doing dream work or paying attention to their dreams, that includes pretty much everybody who's interested in the field of depth psychology probably, but we all have a basic understanding that these dreams can serve as guidance to us, and that we can tap into something bigger that's going on under the surface of things. And it's not that easy necessarily to work with dreams. Anybody who's tried that knows that it's kind of hard to do by yourself. I love the idea of coming together as groups to be able to work with dreams, because obviously there's a way for us to tap into the symbolism and the meaning and that guidance in a different way when you have more than one person working on a given dream. But you've talked about in your own work about how dreams can serve as a guiding system for us. In fact, you refer to them as a GPS. Can you say more about what you think about that and why that's the case?
Yes, I can. So I speak of dreams as a GPS system in terms of an orienting system, particularly when we give focus and time and in terms of dream journaling or paying attention to our dreams, that we can see a deeper directional feel where our dreams will be guiding us, providing insight, reflections, in terms of significant issues, existential issues in terms of how we relate to our sense of being, our personal relationships, our relationship to our sense of nature, earth. So significant issues around death. So and spiritual relationships. So it's really in terms of the breadth of our whole being and beingness. The value of working with dream groups, I've found, is multiple. In the first sense, and this is probably the most direct, is the sense to be heard, to be listened to deeply in a very significant way, where we bring in, through dreams, unknown parts of ourselves at times. There's a sense of bringing forth. There's symbolism. There's a sense of mutualism that can develop, reciprocity. And we can begin to explore aspects of our personal life and see interconnections that connect us to our social field in a much deeper way. So it really helps people to expand their sense of themselves. And as you just mentioned, Bonnie, a significant aspect is also hearing someone else's reflections on the dream and a symbolism. It actually helps to expand our own sense of our own dream. So it breaks through our habitual sense, perhaps where we might think, oh, this is, I'm looking at something and a tree means this to me, or I've felt this relationship. But through a dream group, we can hear multiple lens or receive multiple lens and viewpoints that can expand our own. So that's an important aspect. It can also, in the way that, for example, Robert Bosnak brings in terms of, as many of I'm sure our audience and participants would know Robert's work, the embodied imaginal approach, helps us to connect to the felt, visceral sense of a dream. So I talk about dreams as, in a way, when we work in a dream group, as being embodied, contextual. We get a sense of how that's relating, bring forth more to our waking life, and relational in the breadth of all aspects, the broader field. So those are the three key points. We also see, I think, when we follow dreams over time, we can see how we're influencing each other, how our dreams and our stories interpenetrate into our social circles and more broadly. So those are some of the things that I reflect upon about dream groups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so fascinating. I feel like I'm seeing recently, and maybe this is just me noticing it more, but that there are a lot of television shows or movies or novels that are coming out where people are having, not only paying more attention to their dreams, but also just as a kind of more unique and unusual situation where people are having the same dreams as each other, or they're coming together in some way because it seems like they are tapping into something that is more collective, but they're each experiencing it on an individual level. So I'm really interested in that. I know that a lot of Native American cultures and probably many other indigenous cultures, of course, you live in Australia, so the Aboriginal people is, I'm sure, a huge, amazing resource for being able to understand more about the power of dreams and how that can apply to us. But I feel like they were tapped into something that we have somehow lost in our Western cultures. And when I say Western, I mean modernity and, this kind of consumer culture that we're looking at, because they would often gather in the mornings, for example, to discuss what dreams were had the night before and to understand if there were common things that were emerging, and really to be able to use this to make decisions for the tribe, particularly when they were wondering what they should do next. And of course, we've lost that in our culture to some extent. And it just feels like now, more than ever, with what's going on the planet and all of the, extreme ecological issues that are arising, and the social issues too, by the way, because they tend to go hand in hand, that this is now more than ever a time when we need to be turning to our dreams to begin to understand not only what there is for us individually, again, but also to understand dreams as the voice of the earth, dreams as the voice of those marginalized people, or ideas that need to come forth at this point in time. I found this quote from Jung. I have to read it because when you started talking about the GPS system and the navigation, I just thought it would be a very interesting voice to bring in here. He writes, "What would be more natural when we have lost ourselves amid the endless particulars and isolated details of the world's surface, than to knock at the door of dreams and inquire of them the bearings which would bring us closer to the basic facts of human existence." And I just feel like he had his finger on this a long time ago. And of course, again, all the first peoples had, they understood it long before Jung ever came around. So he doesn't quite get credit for that. But what do you feel about the capacity of dreams to guide us in this time, particularly as related to the ecological issues that we're facing?
I think they have a profound impact and profound meaning and significance. And there are many tangents or target points I could come in to answer to respond to you. But I'll start with you. He used a quote of his was, "Dreams pave the way for life." And I'll just reference one other quote, and it comes from Naropa, a Buddhist text, and the text is the six dream yogas, I should say. "A dream is as much an immediate reality as is the waking state, and it is even possible to see the world more clearly in our dreams than in our waking state." So I think the significance of that is to reflect, coming back to what you're also saying about Native peoples and their valuing of dreams, is the awareness that we are in a broader field of relationships than our Western frame around, which focuses and values more of the ego, separate sense of self. So within that broader field of mutually held social relationships, there's an awareness of the dreaming and the power of symbol and narrative and story and the oral tradition that supports that. I'm just trying to think to frame that, to come back to you more specifically though. The sense of the shared telling of a story is very powerful to hear that. But I know what it was, the point I wanted to bring up in that relationship was that those cultures held the value of dreams in terms of their anticipatory function. We now talk about the adaptive function of dreams. And we reflect that dreams have an adaptive, anticipatory function. We know there are multiple functions of dreams. We know from the field of dream studies and neurological studies, fMRIs, that the parts of our dreaming mind that are most lit up, most functional in the dreaming state, are those parts that connect to our social function. So dreams have an enormously social function, and I think that's can corroborate or collaborate in that sense what we've known intuitively. So I think it's a lovely way to think about where the modern field of dream studies and the burgeoning interest in dreams in multiple fields, because it is being looked at in sleep research, neurological studies, consciousness studies, dream studies, are actually coming together at a significant time to point and direct us back to giving value to dreams in a way that we have lost in the West. But we also know when we look over time and do, the depth of dream studies, that we've had varying times where dreams have come more to the fore in a culture and being valued. For example, in the West, the 11th, 12th century was a time when we know that there was a big transition in the way that dreams were valued. But my own sense and my own reflection from reading within history is that dreams come to the fore most in times of transition, which is what we're certainly in this time of the Anthropocene period, at a time of great change and transitional times, as we call it, also the tipping point. So, in terms of that, I might just add another phrase that we've also used, which is a very powerful and distressing term, is to refer to this period as the sixth great age of extinction. Mm-hmm. So it's a significant time, and therefore when we know, for those of us who are listening to dreams and counselling, particularly, that people are bringing forward more anxious dreams as well. It's a period of heightened, I think, sensitivity. It's a period of turmoil as well.
So, Susannah, just picking back up that thread, you began the conversation by talking about this book that you have been so impressed by and that has had such an influence on you, The Third Reich of Dreams. And you were talking about how these are a collection of dreams of people who were experiencing the Holocaust. And I mean, there's no way to compare, of course, what's happening on the planet now with what those particular people were going through in the Holocaust. I just want to make that very clear. I'm not trying to do that. But I do feel like there is a tremendous amount of trauma that is emerging for people from an ecological standpoint, because they are aware, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, they're aware that something is happening and that things are shifting in a very fundamental way that's actually pretty scary. And I think that we're seeing the psychological implications of that now. Other people that I've spoken to who are clinicians or clinical therapists have talked about how people are bringing in more and more angst about what's going on in the culture. And sometimes that's in the form of dreams or stories or anecdotes, things that happen to them. And sometimes it's just the hard symptoms of trauma that they're experiencing. And so I'm wondering, as far as the dream groups go, what do you see as the potentiality of dream groups in order to be able to help us address this kind of, I wanted to say latent trauma, but it's not really so latent anymore, I think, these days. How does that appeal to you as a way to begin to address it?
Well, let me come back to what I was discussing in terms of dream groups generally, that I think they have great value for individuals who want to develop a greater understanding of themselves personally, of their own dreams, of their significance, of their sense of meaning. And usually that's where people start with a dream group. They want this more in terms of understanding their own dreams, which is perfectly valid. And from that point, there's often an extension of how there's a deeper sense of relationship to community, and then from there to the culture. So I think at any times of transition, having avenues in which people can feel connected and a sense of relationship is significant in itself. So independently, whether the theme of climate comes up or not, just having a medium in which people can feel deeply heard, deeply listened to, and begin to explore that is significant in itself. I know from my own work that it's possible to focus in a dream group, and this is true also for other researchers who look at this, to focus in a dream group on a particular topic. My thesis was concerned with the question of marriage and how I was looking at the experience of marriage and how people were valuing that. And we brought that as an intentionality into the work. And certainly people gained a great insight into their own relationship to symbolism, to aspects that had not been as transparent through waking consciousness, through therapy, through other methods. And also they got a deeper sense of the relationship to how the culture had influenced their relationship to marriage and the symbolism of marriage. So I think definitely it's possible to focus on a particular topic. The work of the Tavistock Institute, Beyond's work with group work, and Gordon Lawrence, who worked with social dreaming, as the idea that in dream groups we can indeed bring intentionality and focus to significant issues. And of course, Montague Allman, who pioneered a very well-known dream method called the Allman approach, was a great advocate and believer in the power of dream group as significant in terms of illuminating issues that were relevant, social issues. So yes, I think it has great importance.
Yeah, I think a lot of people will be familiar with that work, Ullman, Ullman, if anybody's interested in that. I'm sorry, you were just going to say.
No, and I was just going to say there's a wealth of information on the internet too where they can follow up and read Montague's work. Montague Allman was a psychotherapist who really, I think, is credited with pioneering what we call the grassroots dream work movement. Whenever we're presenting through my own individual work or through associations, there's a great interest in people joining dream groups and learning more about how they function. And so Montague Allman's work has been a method that's been easily accessible to people interested in working with dreams, because I think you mentioned, Bonnie, that it can be very difficult to begin to work, to learn about dreams, but that certainly has been a popular approach.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I know that you are familiar with a lot of different methods, and I wonder then if we might take this opportunity to kind of segue to some of your own work and the different, you've been doing this for a while now, but some of the research that you have done, particularly recently, has been related to nature topics, to earth kinds of things. Can you say more about what the work is that you've been doing lately and share maybe some of the insights that have been coming up for you around dreams and earth and home and some of these things?
I can. It was a theme that was an unexpected surprise that came out of my research. As I said, I was looking at the experience of long-term marriage. And in one of the research groups I was working with, a theme that came up spontaneously was around a sense of connection to place, and the theme of belonging. This was not an intended outcome, but it was a theme that resonated with several members of that particular research group. And it was a significant, and actually I had a very significant dream that prompted me to really sort of turn my lens around and look at it. What was this theme that was self-percolating up through the group? I called that dream Coming Alive in the Landscape. So I'll just reference that in the sense of my own personal history. I'd lived outside of Australia for 17 years in Europe, Asia, North America. So when I returned to Australia, even though I had my, obviously my childhood background, it was really coming back in a sense with a new sense of identity. And I didn't realize that I didn't feel at home. This dream really connected me to a sense of belonging and a relationship to place and to land in a way that was new. For several of the other participants in the study, who had come from outside of Australia, born outside of Australia, migrants here, it was also a surprising outcome. So we worked with that sense of theme of place, belonging, and we really understood that what we were looking for was a deeper sense of, you could say, an existential connection. But it was a very visceral relationship. It was very embodied. And from that work, I began to look more deeply into the broader issues of nature, climate, and develop a greater sense of concern for ecological issues. I've had the opportunity since then in several presentations and in various countries to talk about that. Recently, I was presenting in New Zealand, and the topic was living on the shaky edge of the Pacific Rim. It's very, relevant in terms of our two countries and the recent earthquake experienced in Christchurch. So at these, in that venue particularly, people, we were talking about anxiety dreams. What came forward in the discussion and post-presentation where people were experiencing or able to share where they'd had more dreams that were disturbing. So just being able to present and share the types of dreams that are coming up is actually positive for people to be able to bring that into the discussion and begin to think about that, maybe this dream isn't just, relevant to me. For example, if I've got, titanic waves or something, it's not me in terms of my personal issues, but I'm really connecting to the broader field of what's happening in the environment. Maybe I can begin to see that I'm not separate from the environment. What's happening to me is not just me and mine, it's ours. And that we are actually able to naturally, in terms of the sense that dreams are anticipatory, there's an adaptive function, we're part of a interconnected web of meaning and life, that we will be responding to and receptive to the issues that are present in the environment. Mm-hmm. Because we know that in our dreams we connect to personal relationships. Why would we not think that we're not also connecting to issues relevant to the environment that are absolutely crucial to our survival and to the survival of our planet?
Very true. Yes, and I think that you're pointing to something that is highly important. You had mentioned almost in passing, but I know that it's a very core theme that you are working with, and it's something that I really resonate with as well, and that's this idea of belonging, not belonging, of feeling at home in a given place. And these are existential issues, as you mentioned. I suspect that a growing number of people are feeling this. And I think in our culture, this is a theme that is quite common because we don't have the same kinds of touchstones that human beings have typically had over our ancestral kind of past. Again, that's the lack of connection to nature. We don't honor certain aspects of nature. In fact, we don't often even pay that much attention to it. And so we've lost some of these touchstones that have really situated us and oriented us. And I think that that's a growing issue in our culture, because what is it that really makes meaning for us in our culture? How do we feel like we belong to something larger than ourselves? And I think that working with dreams is a wonderful way to be able to get back into that issue of situating ourselves. And you've written an article. Actually, it's something that you're going to be sharing with everybody who's viewing this, but it's called Reflections on Dreams and Dream Sharing in Dream Groups. And you said in there, you referred to the rhizome, which is something that Jung also refers to. And if people aren't familiar with that word, the rhizome is really the root that goes underneath the surface of things and connects to other things in the soil. And you write, my intuitive sense of the process of dream group work is the image of a rhizome, a generous bulb feeding, nurturing, and sprouting new roots and surface growth from beneath the compost, from below the surface, and where any point of the rhizome can be connected to anything other. I just thought that was absolutely a beautiful image, because this is how we begin to put those feelers out and start to, no matter how we feel about ourselves or, whatever hesitations we have, dreams are a way that we can begin to expand those kinds of roots and start to take root again ourselves into soul or into something that's bigger. So maybe say a few more words about that experience and what your hopes are for the future, I guess, of dream work and dream groups in general, particularly as it relates to our planetary crisis.
Yes, Bonnie, that's That's so true, that dreams have the capacity to expand our sense of self, our personal sense of self, to deepen our personal sense of self. We know that there's a whole range, and our dreams have multiple aspects we can focus on in terms of personal, mnemonic, social, healing, spiritual, lucid dreams. There's a range in which we can be thinking about dreams. And that when we share dreams, we'll also see that resonances or themes from people we're sharing dreams with we begin to inhabit, in a sense. So our own dreaming self becomes larger and more expanded by being able to think about dreams and the power of symbol in our life. For Jung, he used the word, he thought that was the key psychological mechanism for transformation is the symbol. And in a dream state, there's the capacity to connect to an implicit way of knowing, to a level of insight that I think is so powerful, because we get it on multiple levels. There can be a deep kinesthetic sense, like almost a felt synesthesia, from the work we know that people have experienced in terms of what we call big dreams. There's an intensity, there's a feeling, there's a color, there's a sense of relationship. It can be connection to awe, to what Rudolf Otto referred to as the numinous, to a sense of mystery that connects us, has the capacity to connect us to the deepest sources of our creativity. And I think that that's really significant to talk about in terms of this emergent, novel, spontaneous, creative driving force within us that's universal. And it's both within human species, but within the very impulse to live. This is what's coming forth, and we can connect with and to. And when we reflect upon that in dreams, people can say from the experience of a big dream, it's something that motivated them and inspired their whole life. For instance, Einstein shares a wonderful dream that he says that really where he felt or experienced the universe, and it was really the catalyst for his whole life. In fact, it became the meditation, he said, for his life's work. So I think it's important to realize the power of what we're talking about with dreaming in that sense. But I wanted to come back also, and then there's a little segue from that, from the terms of sort of this vista, to also focus on what might seem the very humble dream, the very humble insight, and not to neglect it. And I want to reference an Australian author called Patty Miller, whose name is Patty Miller. She writes memoir, and she tells in a book called The Mind of the Thief how she awoke from a dream state with not an image, but with the words, "Go back to where you came from and tell a story." So this connects to what you were talking about earlier with the sense of belonging and place. And she said she woke, feeling a little irritated from this feeling, but it was such a strong feeling, even though there wasn't a visual image, but there was an accompanying sense of relationship to a bird outside a window, tapping, 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 almost wanting to get her attention. And birds were significant, usually a harbinger of something that was positive, but because of the strength of the feeling that came through with just that phrase, she did go back to where she came from, which was a country town in New South Wales on the eastern seaboard of Australia. And that took her into a very large project that connected her. She came from a farming family in the area that connected her with her hometown, to discover that it was engaged with the largest or the longest running Aboriginal claims right that coming out of the Mabo work, which she wasn't familiar with. So she became involved with several Aboriginal groups there, and in fact, both in terms of advocacy and speaking and looking at that issue. So she really connected back to her sense of belonging, sense of identity, what it was to relate to her colonial history, to connect more deeply to the Aboriginal history. And that came, and that book that she wrote, because The Mind of a Thief, really was looking at the Western heritage here, the colonial heritage, and what it was to think that in terms of the Australian heritage, that we were entering into a country into a land that was terra nullius, when in fact that wasn't far from the case. It was a land that was deeply and richly imbued and inhabited with, a 40,000-year tradition, song lines, and a tradition around Dreamtime, which you mentioned also in terms of natives, that really sees the past, the present, and the future as an interconnected field. So I think we're talking about patterns and deep fields of relationship, which we don't tend to hold well in the West. But, so from that simple, go back to where you came from and tell a story, the book came, and that's also been used and referenced in school curriculums to help people focus around a curriculum, a theme of what it is to belong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting, Susanna. What you're saying is really beautiful. And I was just paying attention and really kind of tuned in, I think, as I was listening to you. And I've noticed that I keep hearing the wind chimes in the background as you're speaking. So I guess the wind is blowing there because it keeps coming back. And there's some kind of you were talking about the bird tapping on the window. And for me, the wind chimes have been sort of the same kind of thing, just bringing me back to some kind of consciousness. And I look out my window now and I see the wind is blowing actually quite strongly here where I live too. And so there's that sense of interconnectedness between hearing the chimes on your end and then looking out my window and seeing the windows come up, and then there's the tapping of the bird somewhere. And this it's that past, present, and future have sort of come together for me in this moment, which is really beautiful.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. That's nice to take that moment of presence, even when we're in a virtual field, to actually tap into that sense of connection that is really true for our.
And that's so much a part of it. It's putting our attention to it, because attention has so much power. All this is going on all the time, and we're just not necessarily always paying attention, but there's so much wisdom to be had here through dreams, through paying attention to what's going on in the natural world. As we close here, maybe the last thing that would be really helpful to talk about is to talk about some advice that you might have for people who would like to work with dreams, because a lot of people listening to this might be really interested in the earth and the climate piece of things, or the sense of place piece of things, all of which we've addressed on some level. But to add dream work to any kind of work that one is doing can be such an amazing value. And so just any kind of advice that you might have would be really helpful, I think, at this point.
Yes, I'd like to suggest that people could look to the International Association for the Study of Dreams to look at what's on offer. There's regional events, annual conferences. The next one coming up is in Anaheim in June 2017. There's an exciting new development coming through from the International Association, and that is the first online dream research conference that's taking place November. I'd like to reference also Dream Network Australia. We hold quarterly events, and we will be looking at dream symbolism and connecting to home, sense of place. So, that's very specifically where people can look at events that they may want to attend to in person, but there's also online forums. There's Cyber Dreaming Conference through the International Association. Of course, the CC Institute offers courses and opportunities for involvement in dream work, their dream patterning course. But to look out for places to explore, as we mentioned earlier, the Montague Ullman's work, to look at places where you can perhaps join a dream group or even start a dream group. I'm happy to respond to anybody. I know you'll be sharing my email, and I'm happy to follow up with people. There's an association New Zealand that's very active, Dream Network New Zealand, for those of us who are in the Southern Hemisphere. There's a very active association in the Netherlands. So I will come back to the International Association for the Study of Dreams for the moment. We have regional groups, so that's an opportunity. If you go onto the website, you'll be able to see contact numbers and places where you could join in and see if there's an opportunity to join a dream group if that's of interest. And other than that, it's in terms of personal practice, pay attention to your dreams. Mm-hmm. Take the time to record your dreams. And if you're a person who often does it, who says, "Oh, I don't recall my dreams," because I often hear that, it's very important actually to give time to actually perhaps, to setting an intention to be able to remember a dream. Mm-hmm. So just even seeding that thought is can be helpful. And then setting beside your bed a notebook and a pen so that when you wake, you can take the time to record it. I know with our busy lives that seems impossible, but you'll be surprised if we set the intention, the dreams will come.
Yeah, go ahead.
No. So I think that those sorts of things, seeking out friends to be able to ask them what their interest is in dreams. And there is a wealth of information now that's coming out in various publications. I might mention also a book that's forthcoming from ISD called Dreams That Change Our Lives, which should be out later this year, which again is a wonderful collection of people talking about where a dream has been significant in terms of giving a transformational aspect of dreams.
Lovely.
Really.
Yeah.
So I think there are multiple avenues now, fortunately through the internet, that can give us ways in which we can explore our own dreaming or share with others. There's also various dreams, there are internet services where one can, like a dream bank, where one can share their dreams and also read what other dreams are being shared.
Yeah, it's really encouraging to see so much of this seems to be emerging. And I know a lot of it's been going on for a while now, even for the last several decades. But I think that there is a movement around beginning to remember how important our dreams are collectively. And so some people certainly are on the forefront of that movement and making sure that happens. So it's really lovely to see the body of work that is kind of collecting around us even as we speak. And these are all great recommendations. So Susannah, it's been just lovely to be with you. I want to let everybody know that Susannah is actually going to offer a couple of dream groups online. So if you're interested in meeting with a few other people in a format sort of this, the first 20 people that will respond will be able to be screened, I think, for those groups, but have the opportunity perhaps to participate. So if you're interested in that, we'll put the information here next to the video as it airs so that you have that. And then also Susannah, as I mentioned, is offering a download of the article Reflections on Dreams and Dream Sharing in Dream Groups. And so both of those things, if you're interested, will be absolutely valuable to you, I think. And everybody, you can find out more information about Susannah and also the work that she's doing at www.dreamnetworkaustralia.com.au. That's dreamnetworkaustralia.com.au. Also on Facebook at Dream Network Australia. And then on Twitter, there's also an account, Dream Network OZ. I don't know what that OZ stands for, but maybe people will remember it.
Oz.
Oz, it does stand for Oz. Okay, well, that was the obvious. No symbolism there, of course. All right, great. Well, again, I've been speaking with Susanna Benson, who is a researcher and also an educator, and has done an amazing amount of work with dreams, as you can tell. And I'm just really grateful for the work that you're doing, Susanna. Thank you so much for all of it and for sharing it with us today.
Thank you, Bonnie. And thank you for the opportunity to participate today. I look forward to hearing from other people who also want to talk about dreams. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. For more information, visit www.depthpsychologyalliance.com.